The bustling police station hummed with routine activity as Officer Ryan Carter adjusted his uniform. A seasoned cop with a sharp tongue and a short fuse, he carried himself with the authority of someone who believed respect was earned through intimidation. So when a black man in a flannel shirt walked into the precinct, Ryan barely gave him a second glance until the man hesitated near the front desk. Ryan's irritation flared. "Hey, you lost or something?" he barked, stepping closer. The man met his gaze calmly, but something about his quiet confidence only made Ryan angrier. He shoved past the desk, his voice rising. "You think you can just stroll in here like you own the place?" Before anyone could react, Ryan did the unthinkable. He spat at the man's feet. The entire room fell silent. Officers who had been typing reports or chatting with colleagues froze. The man, still composed, wiped his shoe with a slow, deliberate motion. Then, with a measured breath, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a gleaming badge. The silence grew heavier as he spoke. "I was actually just about to introduce myself," he said. "I'm your new police chief." And just like that, the entire station held its breath. The weight of the moment pressed down on the room. Officer Ryan Carter felt his stomach drop, his face draining of color. He opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. The other officers exchanged nervous glances, unsure of what to do. Some shifted uncomfortably, pretending to focus on their paperwork, while others stared at the new police chief in stunned silence. Chief James Warren let the pause stretch, watching Ryan carefully. He had dealt with men like him before, officers who let their badge feed their ego instead of their duty. He could see it in the way Ryan stood, his hands twitching slightly, his jaw clenched too tight. The chief had expected challenges stepping into this new role, but he hadn't anticipated a confrontation like this on his first day. Slowly, James took a step forward. "What's your name, officer?" His voice was calm but firm. Ryan swallowed hard. "Carter." "Officer Carter, sir." The word sir felt foreign on his tongue, but he knew he had no choice. Around them, the station remained eerily quiet, every officer watching, waiting. James nodded, his expression unreadable. "Good, because we're going to have a long conversation about respect." The air in the precinct felt heavy, like a storm lingering just beyond the horizon. Officer Carter stood frozen, his mind racing. He had spent years in this department, moving up the ranks through sheer force of will, but never had he been caught so off guard. He had assumed the man in front of him was just another outsider, someone who didn't belong. Now that same man held more power in this room than anyone else. Chief James Warren studied Ryan carefully before shifting his gaze to the other officers. Some avoided eye contact, while others seemed almost relieved, as if they had been waiting for someone to shake up the system. James had done his research before taking this position. He knew this precinct had problems, unspoken rules, deep-seated biases, and a culture that thrived on intimidation. He had seen it before, and he knew change wouldn't come easily. Ryan's pulse pounded in his ears as the chief finally spoke. "Officer Carter, walk with me." It wasn't a request. It was an order. Ryan hesitated, but followed as James led him through the station, past the rows of desks and watchful eyes. With each step, the reality of the situation sank in. His authority had just been shaken, and for the first time, he wasn't the one in control. The walk through the station felt like a slow march toward the unknown. Every officer they passed pretended to focus on their work, but their eyes flickered with curiosity. Ryan could feel their stares, their silent judgment. His hands clenched into fists at his sides, but he forced them to relax. The last thing he needed was to show weakness. Chief Warren led him into a private office and closed the door behind them. The room was quiet except for the faint hum of a ceiling fan. Ryan stood stiffly, waiting for the inevitable lecture. He had been chewed out by superiors before, but this felt different. This wasn't just about discipline, it was personal. James sat down, folding his hands on the desk. He didn't speak right away, letting the silence stretch. Ryan shifted uncomfortably under the weight of it. Finally, James leaned forward. "Tell me, Officer Carter," he said, his voice measured. "Is this how you treat everyone who walks through those doors?" Ryan swallowed hard. "Sir, James held up a hand, cutting him off. "Because if it is, we have a much bigger problem than just you." His tone was calm, but there was an edge to it. A quiet authority that made it clear he wasn't here to play games. Ryan's mind raced. He had spent years enforcing the rules, making sure everyone knew their place. But now for the first time, he was the one being held accountable. And as he met the chief's unwavering gaze, he realized something. This wasn't just a conversation. It was a reckoning. Ryan shifted in his seat, his pulse hammering. He had expected anger, shouting, maybe even a formal reprimand. But this was worse. The chief's quiet, measured tone made it clear. This wasn't just about him. It was about the department, the culture, the way things had been running for far too long. James exhaled slowly, his fingers tapping against the desk. "You've been here a while, haven't you?" he asked. Ryan nodded stiffly. 12 years. 12 years, James repeated, almost to himself. He leaned back in his chair, his expression unreadable. "Then you must know about the complaints." Ryan's stomach clenched. His jaw tightened, but he said nothing. James studied him carefully. The reports, the accusations, the ones that seemed to disappear before they go anywhere. He let the words sink in. "I read them all before I took this job." Ryan's mouth went dry. He had heard rumors that someone new might start digging, but he never thought it would happen this fast. James finally leaned forward, his voice quiet but sharp. "See, Officer Carter, I don't just plan on running this precinct. I plan on cleaning it up." He let that hang in the air before adding, "And I need to know right now, are you part of the problem?" Before Ryan could answer, there was a knock at the door. An officer stepped in, face tense. "Sir, we have a situation." James stood immediately. "What is it?" The officer hesitated. "It's about an old case. Something we thought was buried." Ryan felt his chest tighten. He suddenly had a feeling this wasn't just any case. It was one he knew all too well. And if the chief was about to uncover it, everything was about to explode. James didn't hesitate. He pushed past the officer and strode into the main room, Ryan trailing behind him. The station, once filled with murmurs and quiet chatter, was now thick with tension. Officers stood huddled around a desk, eyes locked on an old case file that had been pulled from storage. James grabbed the folder, flipping it open. His eyes scanned the pages, his expression hardening with each line. Ryan didn't have to look. He already knew what was inside. He had spent years pretending that file didn't exist, that the truth wouldn't resurface. But now, here it was, staring him in the face. James looked up, his voice calm but firm. "Tell me why this case was never closed." Ryan swallowed hard. It was ruled inconclusive. James let out a short, humorless laugh. Inconclusive. He held up a document. A witness statement goes missing, a piece of evidence gets misplaced, and somehow the officer involved. He flipped the page. Walks away without consequences. The room fell deathly silent. Ryan felt every pair of eyes on him. His entire career, his reputation, his future, it was all unraveling in real time. James exhaled, setting the folder down. "I told you I was here to clean things up." That starts now. He motioned to two nearby officers. Take him to holding. Ryan's breath hitched. Wait. But the officers were already moving. He barely had time to process what was happening before his own colleagues were leading him away. The badge he once carried with pride now felt like a weight dragging him down. As they passed through the station, James turned to the remaining officers. His voice carried through the room. This department has a choice: change or be left behind. No one spoke. No one moved. And for the first time in years, real change felt possible. The station remained silent long after Ryan was escorted away. Some officers exchanged uneasy glances, while others looked almost relieved. It was as if an invisible weight had been lifted, a long-standing tension finally broken. Chief James Warren took a slow breath, scanning the faces around him. He knew this was only the beginning. Change wasn't just about removing one officer. It was about rebuilding trust, reshaping the culture, and making sure this place stood for something more than just a badge. One of the younger officers, who had kept his head down for years, finally spoke. "Chief, what happens now?" James met his gaze. "Now we do the job the right way." His voice was steady, unwavering. No shortcuts, no cover-ups, no more looking the other way. There was a pause, then a few quiet nods. It wasn't much, but it was a start. As James walked back to his office, he knew this battle wasn't over. There would be more resistance, more buried secrets waiting to surface. But today, a message had been sent. The rules had changed. And for the first time in a long time, the city had a police force that was finally ready to serve.